one of the things that he's gotten into, he's taking a look at the scope of government, including the proper roles of national, state, and local government. And you heard me talk about that earlier in the week. I'm not comfortable with executive actions by presidents, with the executive orders. A government like that gives way too much power to one person, I think. And yet, what we're seeing this week is a lot of people are fed up with how long it has taken by inaction by Congress over a period of time. And so a lot of people are saying, hey, that's not good. So we have somebody who's finally getting stuff done and putting the axe to it and coming in and saying, hey, we're going to clear out the swamp. We're going to, get things all taken care of here and start to get back on the track where we operate as a private sector, where there's accountability and efficiency in the long run. And so we're going to talk about that with Joel when he comes in this morning. Also, how quickly all that's taking place this week. And he joins us here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK. Good morning, Joel. How are you?
I'm doing well, Gary. How are you?
I am doing great. Good to have you in this morning. I was talking just a little bit before, while we were waiting to get you in here about the scope of government. And that's one of the things that we wanted to start at this morning, including the proper roles of the national, the state, and the local government. Let's get into that a little bit this morning, Joel.
Yeah, if you look at it simply, Gary, at the three levels, national is limited but not small. It's supposed to be limited by the Constitution. Those things that are not enumerated in the Constitution accrue to the states. This is where the widest scope occurs. And take a look at it, from the standpoint of the way the structure is actually supposed to function. This is what federalism is all about.
One interesting thing there, you just said the words, and I want people to hear them again, because I think this is where the private sector comes into the public sector again. Limited versus enabling. So many times we've used the government as an enabling tool to get around the basic rules, which are pretty much laid out in the supreme law of our land called the Constitution, whereas our founding fathers wanted it to be a limited government that was limited because of what they had just fought against, which was unlimited, and again, who had skirted all the rules to kind of put oppression on the colonies, right?
Absolutely. And even the amendments themselves were a compromise to try to get all 13 of the colonies at the time to buy into this thing called the National Constitution.
Exactly.
They needed to be recognized as separate, distinct entities, and that's essentially what they accomplished. And the ribbon on that package was the 10th Amendment.
Exactly.
Well, when you come down to the states, this is really where you're supposed to have government at its best and worst in terms of impact on our daily lives.
Well,
most of us don't generally think about the military, but we certainly think about roads, bridges, education, any number of things that affect us day to day, and that's where the states and the local governments come in.
Well, and I think the 10th Amendment is very, very specific in saying anything not specifically given, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, specifically given to the federal government is left to the states or the people. So, for example, nowhere in the 10th Amendment do you see anything about the federal government doing anything about education, and yet we have a Department of Education. We have them meddling in educational affairs, even though that's supposed to be left to the states or the people, right?
Yeah, we managed to do without a Department of Education until 1979.
There you go.
And since the inception, this thing's grown like an octopus with 80,000 tentacles, and it's involved in every aspect of education. But frankly, Gary, it's a mandating organization and a rent-seeking organization. It's not really one that shapes educational policy for the better. And all you have to do is look at performance in our public schools in the last 50 years, and you'll say, wait a second here, where's all that money going? Who's benefiting from this other than the folks who work for these agencies?
And again, it goes back to those two words that I just said in my rant at 6:35 this morning, accountability and efficiency. Okay, are they accountable? Are they efficient? And you would have to say on both counts, no, they are not. And so where do we go to get that kind of efficiency and accountability is a big question. And I know when you talk about state and local government, that's another whole area, right?
Well, it certainly is. As you start to take this thing down to the lower level, you have to ask yourself, and let's look at California as an example. You think Californians have maintained faith in their local governments?
Yeah.
Especially recent, and that's not just the fires. That's the capstone on it, Gary.
Exactly.
That is the result of decades of mismanagement, up and down the line. Things like allocating water to the almond industry and the pistachio industry and the avocado industry, that's all well and good. But at the expense of fire departments in the southern part of the state, Well, this is not a function of not having water. It's the way water's managed.
Right. And as
And
you
this
look,
has been going on for decades.
and the line that you use here, Joel, it seems to me, is you get the government you pay for. Well, in this case, you're paying for a lot of government, but what are the results you're getting in contrast to that in terms of, the rate, the rationale? You're not getting that amount of government, but you're paying a heck of a lot out there. And ask the people right now, again, it's the capstone in the wildfires, if they're getting the kind of government that they want. Again, those fires can maybe go well beyond any human being's ability to plan ahead. And yet at the same time, did we plan ahead enough within our capacity to do so? That make any sense?
It does. I read an article, it was actually a letter to an editor in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, and this was written by a California resident who looked at it slightly differently. He wasn't trying to give government a pass, but he put a lot of it on the individuals who live there, and he used the term hubris, which I thought was really intriguing. In other words, here you have in the LA basin something like 10 million people who have decided that they can beat Mother Nature.
Yeah.
They're going to build their houses cheek to jowl. They're not going to do anything about forest management. They won't do anything. And then you look back and say, well, why won't they, quote unquote, do anything? A good bit of that is their local government who prevents them from doing it.
Yeah. No.
And let's fast forward to the fires. There were people in neighborhoods who were told that if they left, they would not be able to come back. So they stayed in their neighborhoods, and they had people relay food and water to them at the lines where the emergency responders were set up, so that they would not risk having left their neighborhoods and not being able to go back again. Yeah. When you try to do the job of government when government fails, then the government steps in to prevent you from doing that job, rather than help enable.
Well, and that's,
it's mind-boggling.
It should be working in concert, not in spite of. And that's what we get into a lot of times, in spite of the stupid things that government seems to want to put out in front of us a lot of times, which is, again, I guess one of the things that's happening this week and maybe leads us into this idea of the width and breadth of the executive orders that are going down this week. I've said before, I'm not a real big executive orders guy, and yet what's happening now is it's almost like people have said, well, we're tired of Congress not really doing anything or fighting over, this so-called bipartisanship or polarship, we should call it, because that's what it is most of the time. And so Trump's coming in and saying, okay, let's get at it. And taking a pick at an axe this week to a whole lot of what's going on in government, particularly the bureaucracy. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, what it does, first of all, Gary, is punch holes in federalism.
It does.
Big time. Made up of 435 representatives from congressional districts that really are different. Just imagine right here in Pennsylvania, trying to get people in the 10th, Perry's district, and the folks in the 11th right next to each other to agree on everything.
Won't happen.
It's not possible. We have different interests.
Right.
So executive orders say, well, to heck with your differences. We're going to displace federalism with a simple set of standards defined and executed by one person and his department. This is not healthy.
No, and you look at this and you say, is this too much power in one person's hands? And I would offer that it is, and yet at the same time, and I'm not justifying it all by saying this. I don't mean to sound hypocritical, and I'm not. But the idea that, well, it gets done. But guess what? So does a dictatorship. If you want to go have a government that operates and gets things done quickly, dictatorships are where you want to go, or some kind of authoritarian government. And right now we're seeing this ping pong ball going back and forth. Biden says, well, I'm going to make a bunch of executive orders. And Trump comes in and says, well, I'm going to wipe those out. And all we do is we go administration to administration where we give and take on that, right?
Absolutely. It's very unhealthy. This is something that the Congress has ceded to the executive branch.
Right.
Again, look back to the decades of growth and regulations by non-elected officials, the enforcement of regulations by non-elected officials, regulations that essentially reflect the mindset of the administration that's in place at the time. Because we have a Congress, primarily the U.S. House of Representatives, that refuses to do its job.
And then what you have is you have people now sitting in and saying, well, the ends justify the means. So we're seeing progress being made right now, but you don't see it how it's being made. It's not being made the way we set up the game in the first place, with separations of powers and then checks and balances, and everybody looking to do good policy in the long run. What we're working on is good politics, the back and forth all the time of trying to win and lose, as opposed to what's best for everybody in the country, right? That's where it was supposed to all kind of meld together.
That was the name of the game. And then what do you end up with? I'll give you just one quick example of how far things go when you don't pay attention to the main core issues. We have something called the International Trade Commission.
Right.
And they determined under something called the Tariff Act of 1930 that U.S. manufacturers are being hurt by imports of underpriced manila folders from Cambodia and Sri Lanka.
Okay.
How about that? The case was initiated by, are you ready for this, the Coalition of Domestic Folder Manufacturers, and they want protectionist duties. So tariffs and duties don't just come from the president. The commission also asked for public comment on another incredibly important issue, Gary, and it was called the Certain Urine Splash Guards and Components Thereof Study.
Oh, my goodness.
This is where the federal government spends most of its day. We think as citizens that they're thinking about national defense and Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the really big items. Well, guess what? This is the same sort of thing that has expanded government to the point where it's roughly 20% of GDP now. It's incredible.
And so you
want one more?
You return to this rock and a hard place thing, though, where you say, okay, this is silly. So why isn't everybody in agreement that this is silly to have this stupidity going on and to get rid of it together in the way we're supposed to? Make legislation, enforce the legislation. Okay, that's what it's supposed to be about. The legislative branch, the executive branch carries it out, and the Supreme Court branch makes sure it's constitutional in the long run. Isn't that what's supposed to happen here? So we agree that it's stupid and it's wasteful, but what are we doing to get rid of it? And executive orders over and over again make us a little bit uncomfortable, I think, at least what you and I are saying this morning here, Joel. Hey, thank you so much. Good discussion. We're going to continue to talk about that. Again, it doesn't matter who it is. It matters what it is. And we want to see accountability and efficiency, but not at the ruination of the way our government's supposed to operate, right?
Right.
Hey, Joel, we're looking forward to talking to you again next week, my friend. Always good to have you on. A guy that's thinking through the issues. And thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Gary. You take care. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Take care. Joel Sears with us here on WOYK. And when we come back, some news you might have missed that might be true, and then again, it might not. We'll tell you all about that and some more stories as well that Mark's got gathered, all here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK. Don't forget to text the show. You want a Capital Region golf card? Let us know that you want that. But also tell us, what the biggest story was for you this past week. Don't just say the inaugural, something specific. 833-478-4729. Get used to using our text line. That's 833-478-4729. All here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK.